Hey, what's going on? My name is Kai. Today I'm going to be talking about how I wrote music for this podcast right here, Subsister, a real podcast. I composed the score for 6 episodes of this mystery sci-fi podcast. It's honestly really compelling. I think you should check it out. And I'm not just saying that because I worked on it. I think it's really good. So I'm going to cover how I got the job, how I translated the client's ideas into musical ideas, how I refined or kind of redid a track based on client feedback. And I'm going to use this track called The Future as a case study. And I'm going to go through my Logic projects and the feedback that guy gave me on each of them so that we can kind of see how the track progressed over time. I'm going to talk about some sound breakdowns, some composition tips, challenges that I faced writing music for somebody else, what I could have done better, and what I learned along the way. If you learned something, consider subscribing and liking the video. And if you need a score composed, maybe consider hitting me up. Anyway, that's it for the intro. Let's go right into the video. Okay, before we get into the Logic projects, I want to talk a little bit about how I got the job. I met this guy kind of through the grapevine. He was friends with one of my friends. I got connected with him because he was looking for a main theme for this podcast game show he was working on called The Underlectual. Let me find that song here and I'll play it for you. So then after I wrote that music, he told me that he had another podcast project that he was working on, kind of like this narrative sci-fi podcast. And he had some music from another composer that he wasn't happy with. And he wanted me to take a crack at the main theme. And luckily, this was right in my wheelhouse. Sci-fi synth music is perfect for that. And I was able to send over a demo for the main theme that I was pretty confident in. And he loved it. And I got the job from there. Let me close this. A little bit of sausage making detail here. The guy wanted to pay me per song, but I told him I wanted a flat fee. Initially per episode flat fee, and then it just became a flat fee for the whole series because I didn't want him to be in a place where he's like, I need a song for this part of the podcast, but I don't have the money to pay for it because it's a small indie production. I'm a small indie composer. So I just said, hey, I'm on for the project. I'll compose pretty much any music that you need me to compose, no matter how much or how little. I had the luxury of not needing the income from this job to support myself because I had another job, and I had the luxury of having basically as much time as I needed to work on it, so I could make that deal with him. In the end, I ended up getting paid $300 for my main composing work, and then I think I got maybe 50 extra bucks for one more song, way after the fact for kind of a recap. And that's not a lot of money, but it's infinitely more than I've ever made from composing before, so I was pretty happy. You know what? I have a little bit more to say, so I'm going to scale myself up so you're not just looking at me in a tiny bubble. I want to talk a little bit about adapting how you work to how the client works, because I was working in TV post-production at this time, and I was familiar kind of with how the composing workflow works for TV shows, which is we lock an episode or we get a pretty solid cut of the episode, send that to the composer makes his cues for that. There's a watching session where the showrunner and producers and stuff watch the show, they give notes on the score, the composer does a little bit more notes, and then on the mix stage where they mix all the audio and drop in all the sounds and everything for the episode, the score gets layered in then and mixed in then. And all the cues are pretty much laid in exactly how the composer composed them. There's not that much music editing that goes into TV scores, at least in my experience. This is not how the process worked for Subsister at all. Ultimately, the client would just kind of request songs from me based on tone. He'd be like, I need a song to go for this really spooky section. And I didn't know how long they would be, and I had only read the first script. He didn't send me any scripts beyond the first episode. So I would just try to kind of take whatever little info he gave me in the email and distill it down into some musical ideas that I could take and compose a song from or use them as the foundation for a song. And then I would send these MP3s to him and he would loop them and chop them up and whatever to make them fit whatever he needed in his episode, which was kind of annoying because, I had put a lot of thought into how the songs flowed and everything like that. And I thought that I could definitely give him a better song if he just told me it needed to be 4 minutes long instead of a 2-minute song that he was going to loop and chop up, But eventually I realized that I just had to kind of adapt to his workflow because probably on his end, he had all the actor dialogue recorded and then he had my music and he doesn't know how long everything's going to be. I think he's kind of collaging and putting everything together based on all the puzzle pieces he has. It wasn't there was a visual scene that I could score in TV. I was ultimately a contractor and I needed to fit his process. Yeah, that was one of the challenges that I had to face. We're about to hop into Logic. I just want to hit on on this main idea of this video, which is translating clients who know nothing about music into musical ideas. I'm not a scholar of music, but I have some music theory knowledge that I take for granted. I realize that most people don't have this knowledge. People who haven't played an instrument or anything, they're not that great about talking about music in musical terms, which forces you to kind of talk in metaphors and feelings, and then it becomes the composer's job to translate those metaphors and feelings into actual music. By far, the most difficult part of composing for me is kind of getting the kernel of an idea that you can expand into a full song that also is in line with what the client is asking. Cool. Okay, I'm going to put myself back up here. And then I'm going to show you one email from the client that kind of kicked off this particular song that I'm about to break down, and then we're going to hop into the Logic file. So this is an email. Yo, dude, hope holidays and everything have been going well. I got one more, and then we can cash out. Podcast will be coming out in like 2 months. I'll send official release schedule with the official email, blah, 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 in a few days. If you're still down to do one more, this one is the epic one. Still in that techno thriller world, but this is the big moment, crazy shit one. So it can be a bit more active than others have been. Thanks, dude. So I start immediately honing in on what crazy shit means, big moment, active, techno thriller, and some of the things that I think about are like, it's like a final showdown, maybe. It needs to feel aggressive. It needs to feel like there's everything to lose. I kind of have this image of scorched earth in my head. So some of the musical tools that came to me based on that were like heavy drums, a really solemn melody, atmospheric pads and sound design to kind of set the stage, and distortion. I didn't exactly know how the scene would progress, but I chose to end on a note that felt like victory with like a sacrifice. Let me show you how I did that. Okay, cool. So this is the Subsister epic track. This is my first take at it. Here's kind of like that scorched earth, atmospheric pad, or whatever. To me, this is like a deserted battlefield. A little bit more build here. And then we get into this really heavy section, which to me is like maybe two enemies sizing each other up on the battlefield. Again, I don't really know what this story is yet. It's kind of like superhero-y, or like, I don't know. It's not very, it's kind of like operatic, which might be good, might be bad. At this point, I wasn't sure. And you can hear how distorted a lot of these sounds are. I use, overdrive, amp. Every one of these, or nearly every one of these sounds, has some kind of heavy distortion on it. Amp, bit crusher, amp, And then this is kind of that solemn melody that I was talking about up here. It's kind of a really simple minor melody that people can grab onto. Again, heavily distorted. I love using this pedal board in Logic. There's some really cool distortion sounds in here. And then this is the kind of ending with the sacrifice but in victory idea. These kind of heavy chords that build, and the filter cutoff is coming up on them. A little bit of a break right there, just for effect. And then this really goes someplace huge at the end. So that was what I sent first, and I will show you that. I just delivered MP3s. I started uploading waves to Google Drive, but then it was clear that he was never downloading from Google Drive. He was just downloading the MP3 that I attached to the email. So I just kind of stopped with the wave files. So I said, yo, let me know what you think about this epic song. Sent it over. And then he replied, I like the song, but I don't know if it's exactly what I'm looking for. I want to go even bigger. Like, is it possible to go super epic? I'm not sure what to add. Maybe, not sure if this is correct terminology, a faster tempo, some more layers. Again, this is a non-musical person trying to talk in musical terms. And I didn't do either of these things. I didn't give more layers or a faster tempo, I don't think. But anyway, I'm not totally sure if that's the stuff that'll get the effect I want just saying. So he's aware that he's not exactly sure what he's saying. This is the song for the ending, where a character starts rewriting existence and decides to basically disassemble the universe in favor of something new. This is the key part. is not a final showdown. This is like a personal feat of strength, of willpower that has to encompass the size of the universe. So we're going big time in the story. Everything is coming apart. We don't know if he'll succeed in stitching the universe together. Hopefully that helps, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what the process is. I do like the song though, so if you start from scratch, I'll definitely hang on to this one. Or if you want to make changes, I can use this one earlier in the series, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I didn't understand the exact vibe. I said this one is more Final Showdown-y than universe recreating-y, and I didn't see a way to get from where we were with this track to the next one, so I decided I'm going to start from scratch. He can use the song elsewhere, and then this is like some bit about a romance track that I just wanted a little bit more context for. Anyway, this is what I keyed on in here. Disassemble the universe in favor of something new. We don't know if he'll succeed in stitching the universe together. So I set out trying to find what that looked like. What does the universe falling apart mean? And what does it coming back together sound like? So I went through a few attempts at trying to get there. This is the first one. More atmospheric pads, just to kind of be a good, easy intro into the song. And then I have like this kind of arpeggio. But I didn't really get anywhere with that. It was just kind of flat, and it wasn't very inspiring to me, so I ditched that. And then I did this, which is, what is this? This is just, I think this is the MIDI from a Chopin prelude. Is it prelude in E minor, I think? Yes. And this one, I had the idea, I know that this prelude, how it's structured musically and with its chords, is like it has this impending feeling that you don't get until this final resolution with the final chord here. So I thought that maybe I could just steal from Chopin and then permutate it into something that worked for me. But ultimately, this led me nowhere. So then I tried again. This is my next attempt. So again, we're starting with these atmospheric pads, set the stage. It's kind of metal sound in the background. Then this arpeggio comes in, kind of like an oh shit, what's about to happen? That's something big is coming. We get a bass, change the pad a little bit. And then I have this other ARP sound that I'm evolving this one into. I think, am I automating out something here? No, I'm automating this one in. Then I'm just gonna let this one drop out. And this arpeggio, I got the idea for this from this. If you know, you know. Ultimately, I didn't end up using it. It just didn't feel tonally right. It felt a little too cheesy. But you will see, we go to the next one, which is our final project where I ended up. Some of these elements actually come back, so it was a very useful starting point. And this is where I ended up. Similar, honestly, almost the exact same pads coming in. We still get this metal sound down here. Sorry, there's a little gap there just because of how the MIDI notes were laid out. And then we get into this, section that it just feels like sweeps you away. It's kind of like a runaway train. And I have these kind of, all these elements. This element. This element. This element. This element. And this element. And I kind of thought of them as like components of the universe. Again, going back to this idea that he's tearing the universe apart and reforming it into something new. I was thinking like, there's atoms and energy and quarks and whatever the hell, stuff that we don't even know about here. And I kind of wanted to represent it, this milieu of building blocks that this guy can pull on to create something from. So that's what each of these elements represents to me. It's like some kind of aspect of the universe. And he's kind of forcing them together. And so as the song builds, it's kind of like increasing pressure and temperature and everything. On this process that he can't stop. Like, he's gone over the edge. The universe is already torn apart. He has to figure out how to make something new. Bring in this huge organ. Just to tell you that this is some epic shit going down. We're going super epic. We're trying to go as big as possible, encompass the scale of the universe. and I'm permutating all these elements to just be a little bit more acerbic, a little bit more on edge, build them even higher and higher and higher. And now the universe is like, it's almost a singularity, it's almost a black hole. And then it explodes in like another Big Bang or something, and all the fucking energy is flying around, and you know, it's like you're caught in an undertow in the ocean for a second, tumbling all around. And then it hits. All of the same elements, or many of the same elements from before, come back in this section in a more grand and more kind of collected form than we ever saw them before. So like this sound here is this sound here. Just permutated a little bit. It's this sound that we hear at the beginning. It's all the same shit. This is the story that I created in my head to make this song. All the same shit that the universe was made out of is being rearranged into something else after this period of intense transformation. So we have the same pad again. We have this sound, which is new. But I just felt like I needed to flesh out the high end and add like some little magical stardust on top. The organ comes back. What's this? Some bigger pads, actually, that's a new sound, and we get the bass back also. And the metal sound. Backwards metal. By the way, pretty much all of these are just Alchemy presets. Alchemy is a built-in synth in Logic that has a great amount of presets, and then like an insane amount of control that I don't really know how to use. But the presets are so good that I just kind of like use the presets and then use effects to mess with them. Like, for example, this sound is really uninspiring, but I just add on effects to make it sound cool. Same thing, even this sound. It's the same sound, just with like an insane amount of reverb on it. In my opinion, sound selection is kind of like half the battle for electronic music like this, because you want it to feel full, but you don't want the sounds to clash with each other. And so you can see like I'm doing EQ and stuff like that to make things, like I cut out the low frequency on a lot of these sounds so they don't clash with the bass or with this stationary orbit sound. Actually, I cut out the bass on this too. And then you can see there's a decent amount of automation. A lot of it is just like filters rising or like volume increasing or going down to fade stuff in and out. It's nothing too complicated. It's just finding the right layers to go on top of each other. And I just kind of think of like, what texture am I missing? I scroll through a bunch of sounds to find things that sound like they layer nicely. Yeah, it's just a lot of trial and error, but I think this is the most important part. Like, nothing complex is happening musically at all. It's just like drone notes and some chords. It's all in these evolving sounds that make this an interesting piece. This part here, when the universe explodes, this explosion hits early. These are the explosion sounds. So this spacecraft liftoff alchemy preset hits like, I don't know, what is that, like 3 30-second notes or something before the end of the bar, just because I'm like, I want this to kick you in the teeth. I want the universe Big Bang to take you by surprise. So it hits a little bit early. This rumble kicks in later. This reverse kicks in later. Hello? Oh, there we go. Yeah, those are some little tricks that I use throughout this. Automation and good sound selection is basically it. So then I sent this to the guy. Hey, how does this sound for the universe creating song? Dude, I think it's perfect. You fucking nailed it. So, whew. He liked it. It made it into the podcast. As usual, he chopped it up and did his own thing with it, which is a little annoying because I really like how this song came together. But again, you know, once I send the song over, that's all I can do. And accepting my place in the final product was maybe the hardest part about this. You know, my music was used in ways I didn't expect. I didn't know where the story was going. Sometimes when I listen back to the final podcast episodes, there was like some music in there that I didn't write, that I didn't know where it came from. I don't know if it was royalty free or if he had another composer or something, but I kind of had to try not to worry about all of those things. I had to worry about only what I had control over, which was making the tracks that I sent him as good as possible and coming as close to the ideas that he expressed as possible. That's kind of it for the breakdown of this music. Writing music on demand was also a very tricky part for me, and one of the things that I found that, like, you know, this track didn't come fully formed. I didn't have this idea in my head at all. Like, it took me these, you know, 5 versions to get here. And so when I didn't have like divine inspiration, what I could do was just kind of like work on a track and try to make logical choices about what should come next. You know, like, it feels like I need like a big chord sound here to flesh out the mid-range or whatever. I was just kind of like trying to make intelligent decisions devoid of creativity when I wasn't feeling creative. And, you know, like in the past, I had the luxury of waiting for inspiration because I was just making music for myself, but I didn't have that in this case. And for a while, I was like, when he would request a song of me, I would just kind of wait for inspiration to strike. And sometimes it would take me weeks, and he would be like, hey dude, like, what's going on? And I'd be like, I just have writer's block. And he's like, okay, I get it, but like, I need a song. And that wouldn't have been acceptable if this wasn't like also a guy in his bedroom putting it together, you know? If this was like my job, I would need to churn out music on demand. And I think just kind of intelligently pursuing common musical ideas and like logical next steps to your song, like, okay, well, it's got to build, so I'll just put it in, you know, I'll experiment with some like usual build stuff. I think that can be really helpful to kind of jog creativity loose, because oftentimes when I was just doing that routine logical next step stuff, then like I would have an idea like, oh yeah, what would sound great here is like something else, you know? All in all, composing for somebody else was really rewarding, and I wrote some music that I never would have made otherwise, and I learned a lot about collaboration and how to be an artist on demand, and I further developed my, you know, music production skills by kind of stepping outside of my comfort zone. So I'm really happy with how this project turned out. If you want to go to Spotify and search me up, you can find this an album of all the music that I wrote for this podcast, minus one track. This track, the story so far, I wrote for a recap episode, and I released this album on Spotify before the recap episode came out, so you can hear that on my SoundCloud instead. Yeah, with that being said, that's how I managed to compose music for a client. Hopefully there are some tips and tricks in there that you found helpful. I think I say tips and tricks literally every instructional video, but that's okay. Let me know what you'd like to learn more about within music and music production and synthesizer-ness, and I'll see if I can make a video about it. So yeah, keep making music, and peace.